Alright, welcome to Tuesday Tip episode 31. Today we're going to be talking about big cube finger tricks. This is going to be a little different. These first 4 or 5 tips in the new kind of season 2 of Tuesday Tips are going to be more general, not necessarily specific to beginners, intermediates, or experts, but can be applied by anyone pretty much at any time. So big cube finger tricks are obviously something every single person uses at every single stage in their cubing career. And the big thing is that big cube finger tricks are naturally different than small cube finger tricks. On a 3x3, you can do wide turns are fine. You can do backs, Fs, Ds. You can do double trigger Ds. You can pretty much do all sorts of weird stuff on a 3x3 that you really can't easily do when you get to bigger cubes like 7x7. Especially for a lot of newer, like kind of new age cubers that use fancier finger tricks. I've seen a lot of kids at competitions just have pretty insane finger tricks. They're doing all sorts of crazy stuff, using interesting double triggers or like weird like pushes. A lot of that stuff is, while really great for 3x3, and it really can improve your small cube solves. When you get to bigger cubes, it's kind of a high risk, high reward scenario, and the risk just gets too high on big cubes. So, in general, this is kind of an extension on the big cube OLLs and PLLs. It's more of just kind of the ideas behind what turns you should be using and what finger trick styles you should have on big cubes. Again, in general though, as always, finger tricks are specific towards the individual person. A lot of big cubers use different finger tricks, have different preferences, and whatever works for you is really what you should be doing. But I've noticed a lot of people tend to do more similar things just because of the cube. So that's kind of the main ideas. Another big kind of, the whole overarching idea of how I pick my finger tricks is low risk, medium reward in terms of the turns I'm doing. So maybe doing a really interesting, cool G-perm like this, or these style G-perms like that, which use some interesting finger tricks. These are pretty basic, but stuff like that is kind of a medium risk, high reward, and for me that's too much of a risk, especially on big cubes. You don't want to be messing up anything, as a lockup on a 3x3 can be really easy to fix, but if you accidentally mess up a bit more on a bigger cube, it could cost you like 3 or 4 seconds to fix a lockup, and that's really way too much time. So I'll just kind of go over all the finger tricks I use for basic turns. They're all the same for 5, 6, and 7, but I'll just go over them on my 6x6. So U and U prime, pretty basic, easy moves. R and R prime is the same. L turns are the same. I use my index finger like this, and then F prime with my right hand thumb. Some people in some J perms, people do this on a 3x3 for this J perm, but I found that doing an F prime with your left index finger is really risky and something I would not advise at all. I used to essentially do a hand rotation and do an F like this, but that's incredibly slow. I'd highly recommend to always use your right-handed thumb. Oh, another quick note: I am right-handed. I'm very dominantly right-handed when I am doing my finger tricks, and if you're ambidextrous, that's a little bit of a different area. I'm not too experienced in that, but I do think that it's way more difficult to be ambidextrous on especially the higher order cubes 6 and 7 because of their size, so I think this is still going to be pretty universal. So the other turns, for B turns, I just do a cube rotation and then do U's. D turns are the only things that are kind of tricky. So D turns like this. For D, I just probably use my ring finger, and for D prime, I use my right ring finger. When you get to things like D2, I probably just go like this, just do left ring finger twice. But when you do algs like an A perm, which go and then D2, a lot of people like to do a double trigger with pinky ring or ring pinky. This was especially with the new magnetized cubes that are honestly really nice to turn. Like, you can do this pretty quick, but that falls into the medium risk or even high risk, high reward category. An A perm is going to be faster if you can double trigger it fast just like that. But I found, especially in solves in high pressure scenarios, I mess that up a lot and I would strongly recommend going with something that I know I'm going to execute properly on, like this. So I guess to show you like kind of a good example of what I more specifically mean, high risk, high reward, or actually wait, sorry, one more thing. I mentioned that I do my U perms like this, or my U moves like U prime. I've noticed a few other people, especially Mikhail Halkchuk, he does his U primes with a lot of U primes with his right thumb like this. This I think is honestly, it seems a little bit slower, but it seems pretty safe, especially if you're, well, I don't do this too often, so I'm not exactly sure when you would be using it, but I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with doing this if you're already doing it. I would recommend doing U primes like this, but there's certainly, I don't think, anything wrong like this. So, yeah, so a good, another big thing about big cube finger tricks is that you need to be good at rotations. Actually, rotations are probably the most important thing with being good at big cube finger tricks. A lot of 3x3 solves that you have, there's a lot of different F2L algs that are kind of tricky to do or hard to execute that really save a rotation. Like, oh, I want to make this pair in the back, I want to make a pair on the left, I'm going to do a lot of kind of tricky F turns, while if you just do a rotation, the RU alg is a lot easier. I don't really have a necessary specific way to practice rotations. I do claim, like without any evidence, to have the fastest rotations in the business, but it's something that I highly recommend kind of being comfortable with, is doing not more rotations than you need, but if a case is going to be difficult or hard to execute with a kind of a tricky alg from the front face, just do a rotation and then do it like RU or a more common alg. That's pretty much the main idea, is whenever you have an option to do a high risk, high reward scenario, I would strongly recommend to always pick the low risk, medium reward. A good example of this is probably the biggest actual example is H-perm on big cubes, especially now that they're magnetized. You can do H-perm really fast. Like, oops. So you can see right there, that last H-perm I did was probably like 1.5 seconds, and this is a magnetic Yushin 5. But like you also saw, it took me about 5 times to get it perfectly, and in a competitive solve, that's probably going to be, whoops. The chance of me nailing that on the first try and a high pressure solve is pretty low, so I just use an RU alg. Same thing with G-perms. The G-perm, like that's pretty fast, but I would highly recommend, learning all of your RUF or RUD G-perms, because they're just so much more consistent, and even though they may only save you, they may be maybe even a tiny bit slower at the fastest execution, on average they're going to be way faster. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I have to say in general about the big cube finger tricks. Just high risk, high reward is almost always going to be a bad idea. Go for low risk, medium reward finger tricks, and be really comfortable with doing fast rotations, but only rotate when necessary.